Pay no attention to that game back in week 2 against Baylor because this is the Big 12 debut for Utah on the road in Stillwater to face number 17 Oklahoma State. And here to help us break down this big game, Michelle Bodkin from Ute Zone and McLean Baxley from Go Pokes 24/7. Before we get into the analysis, though, I want to tell you more about this matchup that we don't see very often. It's the first meeting between these two schools since 1945. Gas was 21 cents. Yes, I do feel the need to say that anytime we have a date from long, long ago. But back to the present, Utah had some trouble on the road, losing 5 of its last 6 road games versus ranked opponents, while the Pokes have won 7 consecutive home games versus ranked opponents. We also have 2 7th-year quarterbacks squaring off, 2 fantastic facial hair quarterbacks as well. But let's talk about Cam Rising and Alan Bowman. Neither have the advantage in terms of experience, like I said, but what do each add to their respective offenses? Michelle, let's start off with Utah.
Yeah, with Cam Rising, I think he's the heart and soul of this team. And I think we see that, with what happened against Baylor a little while ago. He, you just kind of felt the air come out of the stadium, and it took the team a little bit of time in order to get back into rhythm again. And I think he makes such a difference for him. And we saw that back in 2021 when he was inserted into the San Diego State game. And we've seen it early on this year, even though it's been a very, very small sample size, only 2 halves worth of football played for Cam Rising, but he just makes the difference for the team. He's what makes this go. And I think they're going to be really, really happy to have him back. Not that Isaac Wilson didn't do well last week. He did. He absolutely crushed it for a first start for a freshman. But as you mentioned, there's just no getting around experience, and having 7 years worth of being in a program and kind of knowing the ins and outs of it and what Andy Ludwig wants him to do. And even the experience going into a hostile environment, I think is just going to be a very big difference maker for this Utah Utes team.
And for Alan Bowman, this season we've definitely seen that progression from last year to this year. I think part of that is the confidence, having, a year and a half, 2 preseasons to kind of be the guy, the starting quarterback for the Oklahoma State Cowboys has definitely been a confidence boost. He's not flushing out of the pocket much in these first 3 games. He's not throwing the ball away quickly like we saw last year for the Cowboys. And, coming off of a 400-yard, 5-touchdown game last week against Tulsa. Now, it was Tulsa. They're not, one of the top defenses in the country, but still just being able to find his receivers, trust his linemen, and just kind of trust himself in this offense in year 2 at Oklahoma State has been huge. He's been in these big games. We saw all last year. You think back to Kansas State, Kansas, his first Bedlam last year, beating a top 10 Oklahoma team in Boone Pickens Stadium. He's been there. He's seen a lot of football. He's seen a lot of championship level football, going back to when he was on the sidelines at Michigan for 2 years. So, having Alan Bowman, having that consistency and just that veteranship at quarterback has been huge for this offense. And it'll be the same on Saturday, when they face off against a very talented Utah team.
Yeah, you heard Michelle say that for Cam Rising, he really makes this offense go. Alan Bowman is a big part of this offense, but let's be real. Ollie Gordon historically has been the one that makes this offense go. So I want to get the Utah angle on how they plan to slow him down. But first, let's start with McLean. How much of a factor will he be in this game?
You'd like to think a huge factor. I mean, coming in this offseason, all preseason, he's getting all the All-American, preseason All-American, preseason All-Conference, even, top 10 in Heisman voting last year. And so coming off of that, we were this big expectation for him to just kind of continue what he did the second half of last season. Through 3 games, we haven't seen that. Teams are really doing a good job of loading the box. Last week against Tulsa, Oklahoma State was kind of hoping that by throwing the ball and getting the ball out to the outside, that they would kind of loosen up and, allow Ollie Gordon to kind of catch wind and get those holes and, have those big plays like we saw so frequently last year. But they didn't do that. Mike Gundy said there's only 4 plays last week that there wasn't, 6 or 7 guys in the box. So it's been really challenging for Gordon to get started. I think he's averaging about 3.1 yards per carry, which is about half of what he was doing a year ago, when he won the Doak Walker. So, I mean, I think this is going to be the kind of the week to, if they can do it against Utah, they'll be able to do it against anybody from here on out. And so just kind of finding a balance of, you've got a really good quarterback, you've got a really good running back that you want to use. And so I think this is going to be a big test to see if they can, block for him, if they can create holes and get him going in their, one of their biggest games of the season.
Yeah, as McLean kind of mentioned, Ollie hasn't maybe had as big of an impact as we all were expecting, at least not early on in this season. That doesn't mean that Utah's defense isn't looking into him, and he is kind of their number one goal. Kyle Whittingham said this week that they have to do a good job, that front seven, of getting the stop on him. You don't want to be the first team that he has a breakout game for the year on. And, Rasul Faison with Utah State last week gave the Utah defensive front a little bit of trouble. And so that's something that they're going to go into this week very hyper aware of, because this is another very good running back. And the challenge might be a little bit greater for this Utah team as well. It does sound like they are going to be going without, oh goodness, I just lost his name. Their star linebacker that, Karenni Reed. They're going to be going without Karenni Reed. He's typically the one that gets the defensive front in the right formation. So that now falls onto Lander Barton in order to take that over and make sure that everybody's in the right spot and that guys are ready to go and try and gang tackle, is what Kyle Whittingham said, Ollie Gordon.
Certainly a team effort when it comes to taking down Ollie Gordon. On the other side of things, McLean, Utah's tight ends really have fueled their passing attack. So what can the Cowboys do to slow it down?
Yeah, I mean, last week was the first game that Colin Oliver was not on Oklahoma State sidelines 2020 season. He's been a focal point. He got injured in the first half against Arkansas 2 weeks ago. And I think with, not having him was huge. He's, one of the best defenders in the Big 12, maybe even in the country. Just what he does, the versatility he brings to this defense. So you take him out, who steps up? Nick Martin continued his, dominating and tackling wherever he needs to. One of the top tacklers in the country, Trey Rucker, a safety who's had a really good season to the start of the season. Just a lot of tackles, kind of flying around, being everywhere. But and Obi Ezigbo, a guy that's kind of played the position for at that edge role, and playing a little linebacker, playing on the line, playing, trying to get to the quarterback. That's what they're going to want to do Saturday, especially, just kind of get to Cam Rising. And if they can do that, that'll free things up on the secondary, a secondary that, they've had another year of experience. There's still a lot of redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomores back there, but, they've had experience now, but they're still one of the weaker parts of this defense. So if they can get to the quarterback, make things easier, kind of free up space and free responsibility for the secondary, that'll be huge in stopping this Utah attack that, like Oklahoma State, is pretty balanced and wants to run the ball, but also has a quarterback that can get his guys the ball when needed. So it's going to be similar to Utah. It's going to be a team effort, kind of, by committee, trying to fill that hole that Colin Oliver left. But they showed that they could do it last week. Let's see if they can do it this week against a better opponent.
All right, guys, we've had to wait since the 1940s to see what this matchup looks like, so we could not wait any longer. We simulated this game 20 times on the video game, EA College Football 25, and Oklahoma State came out on top in 13 of those games. So I want to hear from each team. Let's start with Michelle. What's the biggest key to pulling out a win in the real football game?
Yeah, I think for Utah, it's playing assignment sound, playing your game. We talked about how important it is with Karenni Reed likely not playing this week for Lander Barton to get the calls out so that the defensive line is in the right place. And that doesn't only apply to Ollie Gordon. This also applies to Bowman as well. Utah loves to be disruptive, and getting that line play to crash down on plays and kind of canceling everything out before it even gets started is, I think, going to be the biggest key for Utah, where the best matchup is between Utah's defense and Oklahoma State's offense. If you can get that stop, I think you trust your offense to then do its job against Oklahoma State's defense.
I think Oklahoma State's going to score. I think whether that's by Ollie Gordon being able to produce this week or Alan Bowman continuing to have another several hundred-yard game and getting all three receivers involved like we saw last week, I think they're going to score. I think this comes down to, can the defense stop Cam Rising and stop this Utah offense? They have gotten beat for big plays against South Dakota State, against Arkansas. A lot of games last year they got beat for big plays. If they can limit that, then they got a chance to go into Kansas State next week 4-0, win their conference opener after losing last year's conference opener against Iowa State. So a lot on the line, top 20 game in Boone Pickens Stadium. So it should be a really raucous environment. I think comes down to this: can this defense step up without Colin Oliver? With a couple of guys that are seeing the field for a more extended period of time than they were kind of hoping for. But I think all said and done, they'll do that and go home with another win.
All right, guys, I don't know about you, but I am properly prepared to now watch this football game. Thank you both so much for your great analysis. Keep it locked into Ute Zone for all things Utah football, and Go Pokes 24/7 for everything you need to know about Oklahoma State. The writers you just heard from and their entire crews, they've got you covered all season long.